Hello and welcome to Behind the Screen with JM on the Iconic Production channel. I am JM, and we are going to be jumping right into kind of our discussion today. So Behind the Screen is a show where I just talk about game design and RPGs that I love, and development and planning adventures and campaigns and adventure sites, that sort of thing. And so today we have been going through on Tuesdays designing monsters in this mega dungeon for something called Eki Ezeru, the twice cursed house. It's going to be a dungeon in Tanar, or nope, a dungeon in Calypsis, the Zaharet specifically, the setting of my role-playing game Jackals. And so we've been kind of spitballing some ideas for new monsters, new themes, as I set up this dungeon in the Zaharets. So today we're actually going to get into monster design and kind of talk about what's important about monster design and actually design, or at least start to design, the Kashaptu, these Rathic of consumption in the Zaharets. So we talked a lot about how my Rook, good to see you this morning. Thank you, as always, for joining us. And if you are listening on YouTube, you should all know that Rook is the #1 fan. He has claimed that title for himself and is constantly showing his support and claiming that title. So, Rook, it is always good to see you. Love the emoji. So, yeah, today we're talking about the Kashaptu. And as I think we established last time, for me, design always starts with theme. If you don't know what the monster is in the world, you don't know what to design about it. And so as we were kind of talking about this, right, the Kashaptu are Rathic of hunger. They stole the future of the Han, these people that lived in Eki Ezeru, and they twisted and consumed. We talked a lot last time about this idea of transgressive consumption, the fact that there are things that threaten us, not just physically, but threaten to consume us. Ben, who's in the chat, pointed out the idea of noetic horror, right, which is a term for the terror we feel, the horror we feel when our soul is imperiled. So unlike like a slasher film where our body or our lives are imperiled, noetic horror is when the soul or the spiritual nature of a being is imperiled. A good example of this would actually be the original Dracula, right? The original Dracula was so terrifying because it could essentially damn you through no fault or actions of your own. Your eternal soul, if you will, was put in peril because of this external force. And that's sort of what I want to do with the Kashaptu. We talked about how there were Rook does bring up a good point. Pizza is a great act of consumption. So the Kashaptu, we're looking at two monsters. Today we're looking at the Kashaptu. Next week we'll look at the lichens of the Valley of Troikas. So the Kashaptu are a creature that they dwell in darkness. They dwell in this underground mansion. Think Moria, Kilages. We kind of keep coming back to those things. Undermountain, if you are a D&D'er who has found this channel. And we're wanting them to basically have this ability to attack creatures and consume them for their own ability. So if we look what we discussed last week, right, they're spiritual enemies resistant to damage. They're consumptive. They take and incorporate the essence that they consume. They're going to eat possibly memories, valor, or devotion. We're going to talk about that and what happens when they do that. So when I'm designing monsters for Jackals, the first thing I want to know is what kind of creature it is. And so these are definitely spirits. Specifically Rathic. And there are several Rathic in the core book, like a general Rathic, and then I believe it is the the Aluka, which are almost like a vampire. They consume the blood of their foes. But we're going for a more or actually, the Aluka is the Rathic that we use in here. So this is a new type of Rathic. There are other Rathics in Fall of the Children of Bronze. So for me, I need to know what type of creature it is. On ancient lore. All right, so Rook asked the question. So Dracula on ancient lore, skeleton of Uriel. Ooh, that's an interesting connection that I would love to chat and discuss with you. That's how does Dracula relate to the Angel of Death? All right, Rook, that's a good that'll be our February discussion chat. So what we have here is we've got and the location is because I don't believe all monsters should be available everywhere in a campaign setting, right? You want whether it's through encounter tables, whether it's through location placement like I use in Jackals, there are things that are bound to certain areas of the world, and that makes the world both feel unique, but it also means that players who are canny and savvy can go, hey, if we're traveling in this direction, we may encounter these things because these are the local legends and stories and lore that we know of these areas. So that's the initial thing for creating monsters and jackals. And if you look here, I've prepared some standard things that I do with Rathic. So if you look under special abilities, right, Rathic have Inured to Darkness, which is just a special ability in Jackals that means they see in the dark and you can't. So that means they take no clash point penalties, they take no any sort of detriment for being in darkness. And Jackals has very few sources of light beyond what the players carry into it. I think there's one or two rights, and they're very expensive. And so this kind of goes back and leans into the fact that in the Bronze Age, light was life, right? It was very expensive to keep places illuminated after dark. Even more so than in the Middle Ages, which, if you were following Richard Rowland's discussions of universal history on YouTube, he does the Grand Campaign with me. He just did a video on Candlemas and why these candles were so important. Also, Rathic are nasty creatures in Jackals. So in Jackals, there is a division between, well, maybe not a division, there is all creatures are a mix of the spiritual and the physical to varying degrees, and Rathic very much fall on that spiritual side of things. And so a Rathic is an insubstantial being, which means they enjoy a high level of protection from normal weapons, but additionally, you can't just kill one. When you drop them to 0 wounds, Rathic are driven away, but they will return, and they will usually return in numbers. So slaying a Rathic requires a ritual and is basically a feat of legend. If you do this, your Kleos increases, your if you're Trouge, your Mavok, your glory that you bind to yourself is greatly increased by doing such things. So let's get into how I design monsters in Jackals, and I think I'm actually going to reactivate my old blog, Origins of a Dark God. And I will post a link down here because I want to be able to post these online so people can use them and give me feedback on them. So I think I'm going to restart that, and then once I finish the Kashaptu, once I do the write-up on it, the lore write-up, I'll post it so that people can use it. And again, if they feel like they want to engage with it, they can. So, all right. Additionally, let's just jump into it. So I broke down, in Jackals, every monster has a very simple way that you can define what they can do. And essentially there are, hey, Bob's in the chat as well. Bob, always good to see you. And to the other people who are here, thank you so much for joining. Feel free to jump into the chat. I will always respond and interact with people, as you may have already heard from my discussions with a good friend, Rook. So, the 4 main aspects that you assign stats to in Jackals are defense, combat, knowledge, urban, and common skills. So the common skill is basically how smart is the creature. If it was doing, and these all correspond to skill categories in Jackals, but instead of listing out every skill individually, I just give them a broad grouping. So Rathic are terrifyingly smart, and so we're going to give them a 70%. So anytime they're trying to do a craft check, a persuasion check, an intimidate check, any of these things that fall under the common skills, they have a 70% chance of doing this. And so in Jackals, right, anything 91 or above is an automatic failure. And to basically simplify the system, it's the Price is Right system. You want to roll as high as you possibly can without going over. So 70 is pretty intense. Knowledge skills are things like lore, healing, that sort of thing. And as ancient beings, we're going to give them a 65% in knowledge. Urban is things like sneaking around, thieving, that sort of thing. And while the Kashaptu are creatures of darkness, I don't feel like they have any sort of special ability in general thieving, so I'm going to put this down only at a 35. But again, Jackals has several rules that you can use, and so I'm going to increase their stealth to 65% when in darkness or shadows. So that kind of represents the fact that they are creatures of darkness, and if they are in their element, you have a much better way of interacting, or much harder time detecting them. Defense is, if you are used to 5th edition, this would be like your saving throws. So this is dodging out of the way, resisting with willpower or endurance. And so I feel like a 50% that they have a 50-50 chance of shrugging any of this off. If you guys have any thoughts on any of these or special abilities, please feel free to kind of jump in and discuss this. And then finally, combat-wise, I'm going to give them a 65. No, they're Rathic. They need to be terrifying. Let's give them 110% in combat. So if you're attacking them, actually, I think we're gonna build something cool here. You don't see enough tentacles. You want more tentacles, Bob? I will make the thing that lives in the deeps of Eki Ezeru and give you just as many tentacles as you need to. I don't know how I wanted to finish that sentence. I started off strong, and then, much like the tentacle creature that Bob wants to design, it sort of whoop, became multifarious and just kind of sprung out from there. All right, Rook, you got a good point. If they are a shadowy creature, let's bump that up to 60%. All right, so wounds. Wounds is how much damage they can take before they, are driven off. And so for Rathic, Rathic are very difficult to deal with. And more importantly, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give this guy 80 wounds, which, if you figure that on a critical, most heroes are going to do somewhere between 18 and 24 points of damage. That means 4 crits or 8 normal attacks just to kill this before we invoke protection. And these guys are insubstantial and spiritual, so I'm actually going to give them essentially the equivalent of plate armor when it comes to resisting damage. So essentially this means, hey, when they take damage, 6 points right off the top is ignored. They're not as affected as normal creatures. Now that may not seem like a lot, but if you think that if you get the idea that a one-handed weapon in Jackals only does a d6 of damage, a light one-handed weapon, that means on average they're not going to take any damage from a one-handed weapon. These creatures can move, so let's give them a 24 speed, and then I feel like they should be fast. But I want to play with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to have them start off slow and sluggish, and put a star here. Now in Jackals, we use clash points, and clash points are this meta currency that allow us to react to incoming attacks. And so, in general, for monsters, the way this works is every clash point makes them worth about one creature in like one PC in combat. So, right, Noricon, which are the tiniest and weakest of the Takan, they're worth half a clash point apiece, which means you can throw, in theory, 2 to 4 of them against a single Jackal, and that's about a balanced fight. Now, I really want these guys to challenge an entire party of Jackals, an entire pack of Jackals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them 12 clash points, which may seem like a lot. And when we go through playtesting and revisions, this is where we fine-tune these numbers. But essentially what I'm saying here is that, yes, exactly, Rook. With a clash point of 12, this is more than enough to take on a group of 5 or 6 Jackals, because they're going to get 1 attack apiece, and the Kashaptu only has to spend 1 clash point to turn this into an opposed roll. Now, right, this is designed for higher level PCs, and in Jackals, once your combat skills get above 100, you get to start making multiple attacks. So while this is going to be a terrifying threat for low-level Jackals, higher-level Jackals should be able to kind of balance this out. Now, let me ask you this. I think that one of the things that I may do is let's actually drop this to 8, because again I have this. I'm having this crazy idea for designing these. Treasure score is, how much treasure do these things have? And here's the thing: they live in the depths of an old, essentially, let's call it like an elven home. So like think like Doriath, the caverns of Nargothrond, right? Gondolin, that kind of thing from Tolkien. Again, more like Kalages or Moria from like more modern fantasy. And so what I think is that these guys should have like the highest treasure score in the game is a 6. And so I'm going to say that these guys have a treasure score of 5. If you can drive them off, this is the equivalent of becoming a minor lord in the game. So we're talking like the grave goods of dead nobles. We're talking like thousands of silver shekels of silver, weapons and armor, magic items are probably located in these guys' layers, if you will. And then last but not least, you have corruption. And corruption is that metric of chaos that infuses the creature. And as these spirits were sent from Imilages in the north to basically corrupt an entire mansion of the Han, I'm guessing that these guys have a massive amount of corruption. Now, the Yamim, which are the Chaos Serpents, the Chaos Dragons in the Zaharets, have a corruption score of 15. But they're still embodied flesh. These are essentially spirits of corruption. So I'm going to put this corruption at 20. And this actually helps out our Jackals, because there are several things which trigger off doing damage equal to the corruption of the creature, or equal to half the corruption of the creature. And so this kind of is a balance here. Now, the reason I have these little stars here, and maybe we got combat at 80, let's put a star here as well. So we're going to give them a special ability called Consumption. And what we're going to say is, as the combat trying to talk through this. Basically, essentially what I want to do is, as we build the attack abilities of the Kashaptu, they are going to inflict wounds, and they are also going to inflict an additional detrimental effect. And as they inflict these detrimental effects, the GM is going to basically be able to spend them on increasing the Kashaptu's abilities. So how do we want to write that up? When the Kashaptu attacks, it will drain. And what did we say that it was going to drain? Memories, valor, or devotion. Memories, valor, or devotion from its target. When it does, the lore master may spend these points on one of the following abilities. So, I think what we want to do is let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, put a star there. All right, so we'll call it increase skill. The sorry about this, guys. It keeps jumping around. Let's just put a new note down there so it uses it as a barrier. Kashaptu gains plus 10% combat skill. When this takes them, maybe if I pull it back a bit, there we go. Sorry for the jumping around. When this takes them above 100%, they gain a talent of their choice. So that means if they've hit you 2 or 3 times, now they're starting to generate new combat abilities. So every time you fight a Kashaptu, it's going to change and grow more powerful. We're going to say increase initiative, which I cannot spell apparently. The Kashaptu gains +1. Or let's call it +2 initiative. Increase clash. Kashaptu gains +1 CP. Increase protection. Kashaptu gains +1 pro. This protects against, well, no, it's insubstantial, so all of its protection always applies. So I feel like that gives us some cool abilities. It's the cursor, that's it. It is haunted, Bob, thank you. Rook, it's true. Scapel hungers for more digital space as we grow through here. And then the last thing that I want to do is let's call it invoke right. The Kashaptu. Okay, let's spell my own monster's name correctly. Can I add that? Learn spelling. Learn it. There we go. Invoke as a free action any right from the Muathanic tradition or that it has stolen from a jackal. All right, so now what we have is a creature that starts off strong. Let me move this over here. It starts off strong, it learns, and yes, it is essentially the Skynet of spiritual creatures in my world, Bob, I guess. But the other thing we need to do is, Bob brings up a good point, let's give it a special ability called Remembrance. And what this is going to do is we're going to say, when driven off the Kashaptu takes 1d6 weeks to reform. However, it retains all abilities gained from consumption, why were you not? There we go. And seeks out the jackals it has fed from. It is. It's like building a rival, and the really terrifying thing would be what happens if you encounter 2 or 3 of these things, and now you have 2 or 3 of these Kashaptu who are actively hunting you while you are in Eki Ezeru until you find a way to end their existence. Ooh, an ethereal doppelganger. All right, so let's add one more crazy thing to this ability. Tell me what you guys think. Rook, if you like this ability, we'll keep it. If you guys are like, nah, I don't like it, let's call it Consume Essence. If the Kashaptu slays a jackal, they may assume its form and leave Eki Ezeru. So now what we're saying is, if it gets bad enough that you have killed, it has killed a jackal. Killing a jackal is what allows it to be free of this binding within the mansion. And now there's somebody who looks like your old buddy and is now running around doing whatever the heck it wants out in the Zaharets, probably tarnishing their name forever. All right, well, Bob's... Bob, I want that emoji. It's a skull holding its face, and that's mwah, I love it. Looks like people love and hate it, or maybe they love to hate it. So we're gonna pause here. I will at the start of Tuesday, I'll go through how I built the combat range, and I'll kind of walk through with that. But we'll kind of do the same thing again for our lichen creature, which is going to consume flesh in a different way. Or we'll just finish designing this monster next Tuesday. That might actually be a better thing. Kind of walk through how I build combat ranges, what they're good for, and why I like using jackals. So on Thursday, we're going to be discussing God's War, a Gloranthan board game put out by Peterson Games. Why I love it. If I can get Ben in the chat, which I see freedom, that either means Ben is out of his meetings or is talking about the Kashaptu fleeing out into the world. Ben brings a unique take to the brew in God's War, and I will try not to share that story, but it may come up. I'm kidding, Ben. I would never share that story. But now there's a mystery around it. So yeah, we're going to talk God's War, why it's awesome, what I love about it, why I think if you are a fan of Glorantha, you should definitely try to pick up at least the base game for this wonderful mythic game put out by Peterson Games. But we'll be back on Thursday with more Behind the Screen, and on Saturday, we will be discussing, and this is for you, Rook, we will be discussing the trolls of Glorantha, the Uz. And I said dwarves last time, and that I misspoke. We will be talking about dwarves in March. But yes, this Saturday is Exploring Glorantha. Oh, Ben, Brew just want to have fun is possibly the most terrifying way you could have phrased that by using a 80s song to do so. So I don't know whether that is mad props or shame on you, but probably both in equal measure. And if you like what we do here on Iconic and you want to see how I run a game and you haven't checked out our YouTube, tonight on the Ulysses International Twitch channel at 7 p.m. Central Time, we will be building our characters for our new Torg game, which will be running on the Ulysses International channel, hence why I'm wearing the Gaunt Man today, the big bad of Torg. Ben will be there playing a delightfully Hellboy-inspired character. Looking forward to that. And we're just going to be building characters tonight, and then we're going to be doing 3 one-shots over the next 3 weeks to kind of introduce the characters and the players and the audience to the cosms of Torg. So until next time, thank you all for joining me for Behind the Screen. It is always good to see you. If you like what we do, please consider following here on Twitch or following us on YouTube. To quote Bob, smash the like button. If you like this video, please comment. I try to respond to all of the comments that we have on these behind the screen videos. And if you really like what we do, please consider following or subscribing here on Twitch or jumping over to Patreon, patreon.com/iconicproduction, and consider joining us there. We have a Discord channel. You can chat with Rook, who is just a delight to chat with on Discord, and interact with us there. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM, and I will be back on Thursday with another episode of Behind the Screen. Thank you all for joining me. Have a wonderful week.